welcome to Imagining a 21st Century Spirituality. Uh, and few people coming in here. I just wanted to put the screensaver up for the people who are joining us later on YouTube, and there'll be a few of them, I'm sure. Okay, well, I can take that down. And we're back. Yeah. Thank you, Sharon. All right. Well, I want to actually flip on a screensaver to begin with, so that will refresh our mind on what we've done in some previous talks, and it'll lead us into working with today's theme. Yeah, you might recognize this, or maybe it's new, depending on who you are and when you've seen this. But this is a kind of what I call an eternal mandala, the mandala of eternity. It comes through a number of sources, but the use of mandalas, in other words, an image which has the four directions in it, like this does. It's an image of reality for Tibetans, especially, and I work with Tibetans quite a lot. But the Dalai Lama always says when things are tough, he says, well, when you feel challenged or you feel overwhelmed, remember eternity. And that dissolves it in a sense, because in eternity, everything seems, you have space for everything. You won't be overwhelmed. Now, this is a kind of a mandala or a map of every moment and of all eternity at the same time, because it's moving. We know this from quantum physics, that the universe is expanding into what? That's a great mystery, but it's constantly expanding, and actually you could actually, if you know enough about astrophysics, you could see that this is how every star comes into being. The reorder phase, it comes into being. There's a bang, and there it is, and then it becomes the star, and then it falls apart, and then it disappears into a kind of black hole of dark energy, and then boom, it'll come back again. And so this is everything from astrophysics to this moment, And this is the order, disorder, emptiness, reorder. It's the movement of all reality for all eternity. And it helps to see that, especially when you're in a time of personal or societal disorder or emptiness. Those are the tough areas. And we're going to, if we have this as a background, we can understand then what a 21st century spirituality should be, and how it can help us navigate this, especially in the disorder and the emptiness parts. When things all fall into place and there's something new and it's perfect, well, that's reorder, that's resurrection too, and then the order, and then it becomes your new map for reality, but then that falls apart, and then there's that emptiness that follows it. And so we're going to look at some ways to navigate this. James Baldwin, the great American writer, he said, the world changes according to the way people see it. And if you alter even but a millimeter the way people look at reality, then you can change it. So not to get fixed into a view that even when as everything changes, you hang on to the view, which we all tend to do. He said, but if you can alter the view, even but a millimeter, the way people look at reality, then you can change it. And this model allows you to do that. this model actually calls you to do that. So I just wanted to put that back up for our refresh us, and then we'll go on to a new model. Yeah, so we'll stop that. And yeah. Now, I'm working off, I don't really have, I have like my notes are like in a holistic kind of web effect here that I'm working off because this is too big a subject to put down in linear thought. And so I'm going to give you a kind of mandala approach. I'm going to talk about four aspects of what I imagine 21st century spirituality would include. And I'll be sending out the notes on this, and you'll be able to see my kind of web that I'm working from. I need to do it that way just because we're talking about something big. Now, first, along with that map of eternity, which would be infinity and eternity, is when time and space go out beyond boundaries. That when time goes beyond the boundaries, then it's eternity. When space goes beyond the boundaries, it's infinity. Again, what is the universe expanding into? You get to mystery when you're working with this kind of stuff. And so 21st century spirituality will emphasize, first of all, experience, not belief, because belief is, what we hold on to in the face of everything. And that's not, that's not going to be the way to navigate what we're dealing with here in the 21st century. Experience, though. Yeah, experience, not belief. And you start to trust in your own experience. And I want to validate the fact that your experience is unique. And you got to trust your experience. If somebody tells you this is the way it goes, this is what you should believe, but your experience does not resonate with that, you got to go with your experience. And in a community like we have, a kind of fluid community that's been going on for a little more than almost coming on to 5 years, 4.5 years, we share our own experience in the last uh, part of it's a part of every liturgy that we do, every meeting that we have. At the end, we share our own experience, and that's valuable because that's where community really helps because we all have our own unique experience, and we're changed by our hearts are changed, our voyage can be changed just by somebody saying, "Well, this is what I'm experiencing now." And then it becomes your experience. If it resonates with your heart, then it becomes your experience. Your experience becomes greater. Now, I'd say there's three characteristics of spiritual experience. And then we'll look at the four ways, the mandala of how it could fan out. But these are the three characteristics. One would be resonance. And resonance is a heart term. This group that we belong to, this community, is called Heart to Heart because we're emphasizing the heart. The heart's a different organ of experience than the mind. The mind is very helpful. Left brain's very helpful for survival. If you could navigate, you wouldn't be here. So that's fine, time and space. But the heart's a deeper organ of experience. It sees the whole picture. And it resonates. What is resonance? It really means to resound. In other words, like if you hit a certain key on a piano, and then the tuning fork if you have all the tuning forks, you hit the key on the piano, and if you hit the C, the C tuning fork will resonate. So as you listen to this talk, you don't have to worry about the details of it so much as if you're listening with the ear of the heart, you'll notice things that resonate with you and then things that don't resonate. Pay attention to the things that resonate. That's how a heart is aware, a holistic awareness. And so when I read a book or when I listen to a talk, I'm not worried about getting down to details so much. You can always do that later, but it's the first thing is always what's resonating. What it's like this inner bell or this inner tuning fork in your heart. And if you pay attention and listen that way to this talk, all of a sudden things will come out. Yeah, and you'll get the gist of it. Now, the second characteristic of 21st century spirituality would be mystery. You got to realize we're dealing with mystery here. In one poem I wrote, I said, we're born into mystery, we live in mystery, and we die into mystery. The mystery is the kind of emptiness part of the mandala. Uh, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was murdered by the Nazis, hung by the Nazis because he would not comply with all their wishes. And he was a Lutheran, a German Lutheran theologian during World War II, a really great guy. And uh, he was talking about when he among other things, he saw the Lutheran religion in Germany and the Catholic religion. Most Germans at that time were either most of them were Lutheran, but there were some Catholics. Both of those institutions went in line with the Nazi Party, and he just wouldn't do it. And so that's amazing in itself. That kind of, and he got hung, of course, for his not going with him, but he wrote a lot before while he was in prison. One of the things he said, we really need, based on what the two institutions did, capitulating to the Nazi regime. He said, we really need to have a religionless Christianity. What a term. A true Christianity that's not, in a way, not that doesn't bow with the institution, a religiousness, religiousness Christianity. Hard to say that three times. And also, he said maybe we had to go for a century without talking about God, without using that three-letter word. He said because it's too small, because the Nazis co-opted God when they co-opted the institutions, just the way we got that going on now with the kind of white Christian nationalist movement. And so you could use the word mystery. You could use the word life, capital L, capital M. And then finally, there's depth. So you work with resonance, and then you realize you're dealing with mystery, which means you don't know. With every meditation, you don't know. Meditation is pure experience of the mystery. And with meditation, you don't have to know where you're going, and you don't have to know what to do. There's nothing to do. You're just dancing with mystery. You're dancing with the spirit. You're dancing with the mysterium tremendum, as they said in the medieval times in Latin, the tremendous mystery. And then that takes you deep. And sometimes the emptiness is the gateway. Well, all the time, actually, emptiness is the gateway to mystery and to depth. As one Tibetan told me one time, when the existentialists went very deep and they hit the emptiness, they thought it was nothing, and so they came back to the surface. Where if they kept going through the emptiness, they would have hit the fullness. They would have hit another depth, and that's part of it. So resonance, mystery, and depth. Yeah, that's key here. And we in our meetings here, we always have a meditation session, which is pure experience beyond words, and where you can practice that. Okay, now I'm going to talk about another mandala, and when you get these notes, you'll be able to see them. And there's these four aspects of at least how I imagine. Again, how I imagine 21st century spirituality, a form for it. And again, everything that's in you look around for just a minute. It's always good to do this. I'm looking around. Everything you see here in terms of physical stuff, manifestations, was imagined before it was created. Somebody, imagined this bowl and this striker. It just, well, your cell phone's the best example. Steve Jobs had to imagine that. Nobody'd ever imagined being able to hold a phone in your hand with all this other cool stuff on it. Okay, so this is how I imagine it. The first thing would be view. As James Baldwin said, when you change your view, everything opens up. And so view is sort of the foundation to have a different kind of view of, there's not just all of us that are in this religion, that we're all the chosen people in our little group, and then everybody else is going to hell, sort of the view I grew up with. You took pity on Protestants and other people because they didn't have, they weren't Catholic, they were one true faith. And, Jewish people have done that. Everybody really does it. You think, well, our group, they're the greatest than everybody else. And so we need a bigger view. Okay, so what I would say about this view, first of all, and it's helpful if you've been here for a while and you've broken ground in terms of what it means to view the world with a whole brain, with your whole consciousness, which means your left brain, reason, uh, uh, time, space management, science. Science is the extension of the left brain. This computer is an extension of the left brain. It's quite handy. Here we are together, you see. So it's brilliant, but it's basically survival based. Okay, and you want to honor that in all parts of the left brain, both the cognitive part and the emotional part, which we're not going to go into all that, but yeah, we have that. And, like we're getting rid of science now. And truth, observable truth. That we don't want to do that, but we're making a kind of few missteps along the way. But so that's part of our consciousness. The other part of it, that's the thinking part. The other part of it, the right brain, is awareness, and that is the sacred operating system. It's our vehicle for connecting with the great mystery, with the spirit, with something that is beyond time and space. Because obviously the universe is beyond time and space. Say. And for that connects us with the wisdom tradition. So on one hand, we're connected with science as the deepest form of the left brain. Science is just measuring, testing, and Buddha was in that vein. I think Buddha was one of the first real scientists in terms of, long, two, 2,500 years ago, the Buddha said, don't trust me. Check it out with experience. If I tell you something, don't believe it. You try it. And he left a series of experiments, you see. He was particularly working on that side of the brain. He intuited, he knew that this ball game was much bigger than what he was taught religion wise. But he realized, he said, well, maybe the reason we're not happy and we're sort of ill at ease is because we keep trying to change the furniture out there in the living room. Once I get it just right, then I'll be happy. He said, maybe we need to turn our microscope inside and go for and look at our problems there. And so he was really a scientist. His Four Noble Truths are really a medical model. We're all freaked out. We're not happy. That's the symptom. And then you come in and then the diagnosis. Well, why is that? And then the prescription. The third noble truth and the fourth noble truth is you take the therapy. We're going to go into his curriculum of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path in the future at some point, because it's worth looking at. He had a curriculum for becoming an adult human being, one that could live in the fullness of life with a lot less anxiety than we're living with now. Now, the right brain is again how we can actually interface and dance with the mystery, how we can actually pull on the wisdom traditions, and all the wisdom traditions from Buddhism, Hinduism. When you get to the mystics in those traditions, which actually are the ones who write the wisdom traditions, they only make sense to the right brain. And so the right brain is, you can do your spiritual reading there, whatever, but a view should be whole brained. In other words, that we have both science and wisdom. There's no real barrier between science and religion, between science and spirituality. We're able to do both. So it's not like one's bad. You got to have, no, there's really no wall. They're not two. They're a unified whole because our brain is a unified whole. And it's in us. We have this consciousness to go both ways, to arrange our life so that we can pay the rent and feed ourselves and all that, but also that we can know uh, uh, our connection to something bigger. Now, each of these four things, four aspects of 21st century uh, spirituality, has a question. And so the question for the view, for the biggest view of this whole thing, the question there, is not the question our culture asks. Our culture, when you meet somebody, you might say, oh, if you meet somebody who looks a little different than you say, well, where are you from? Are you from Southeast Asia? We ask that question in our culture a lot. And it's sort of, it's sort of rough on the people who, say, well, yeah, I'm from Cleveland. I said, no, where are you from? Because, they look dark or something. Or sometimes they'll say, well, what do you do? That's not the question of a 21st century view. The question would be, and I really think this is a big question you got to take seriously, what am I living for? But get that. I've been trying to talk to my two grandchildren about this because, this is the question. Merton said one time, he said, your life is shaped by the end you live for. And he says, at another place, he says, don't ask me about how I comb my hair or, what my favorite toothpaste is. He says, ask me what I'm living for. So this is what you call a teleological statement. Teleos means end. And so that is underneath your view. That's the ground of this particular, what am I living for? Now, the next turn on the wheel there is, who are your teachers? Because this is going to become more important in 21st century spirituality. Merton was, again, he was kind of pioneer. He was deep in the Christian contemplative tradition as a Trappist, had been practicing. And then at the end of his life, and this is in the 60s now, late 60s, life took him on this grand travel where he was able to go to northern India. And so basically there he was going from mountaintop to mountaintop day after day, sitting with these hermit lamas in the Tibetan tradition. And they was talking shop. He was saying, what do you do? How do you do this? Because they'd been meditating far longer than we have. They've been working with the mystery, a thousand years before Saint Benedict started with a contemplative tradition in Christianity. So, who are your teachers? Here's the question for this turn of the wheel: Who are your core teachers? Now, mine are both the Buddha and Jesus. A third tradition would be all the poets, and those are really my three core traditions. These are my wisdom traditions that I keep pulling on over and over again. And then a fourth one might be Jungian psychology, because I really resonate with that kind of psychology. So these teachings resonate with me. You might have different ones, and so that also gives us something about 21st century spirituality, is that it will be a kind of interspirituality. We have 100 years ago, you only knew the church in the holler. You only knew that, that was your thing, your church you grew up in, if there was any church at all, or your tribal tradition or whatever. But we have access to the whole world now. But over time, you start to really see who your core teachers are. These are the teachings that come to you with a kind of resonance and a presence that you say, yeah, these are my guys. And when you have an interspiritual group like we have, your guys might be your 12-step community. Some people have had that resonated with you, and in some cases that saved your life. Okay, so these are all, the teacher there is the community itself. So, but who are your teachers? That's the second question. Who are your core teachers? And and just the fact that that some Buddhists might have touched it. I don't I don't know what I am really, other than who my core teachers are. I'm just trying to be an adult human being is what I'm trying to be, an adult human being and who relates to the spirit as it is, because I don't think that you can silo the spirit. So your teachers, who are they? And they have a kind of authority for you. The interesting thing, like with Jesus and the Gospel of Mark picks this up. Uh, when he does his first healing in the gospel, which is he breaks all kinds of laws. He heals in the synagogue on the Sabbath. You weren't supposed to heal on the Sabbath, and so he went right into the center of that power system that he was in, and he broke the law because healing was more important to him. And he healed a kind of guy who was possessed. Who knows what it was? They called him, he had demons, but he did. There's a lot of interesting things about that encounter. But after he healed this guy that nobody had been able to heal, the guys in the audience behind were muttering and says, "Who is this guy? He teaches with authority, not like the school rabbis." And he didn't appear to be a rabbi. He wasn't wearing any of this stuff. He was just a teacher who healed people. There's a big difference between somebody who is just he talks and moves and acts with authority. There's a big difference between somebody like that and an authoritarian. And that's something we especially when let's face it, we're in an authoritarian government now where one guy is calling the shots uh, because he has grabbed the power. And those are not that's different than a person who has inner authority. There's a kind of presence. So we this will be a time where there could be many teachers, but then there's a few core ones. So who are your core teachers? um the third turn of the wheel would be in old spirituality, people will say, "Well, are you a believer?" And that's especially in England, they say that. Are you a believer? No, I'm not a believer, which just means I'm not Christian or whatever, or questions of that ilk. Where I think now in the 21st century, the question that's more helpful is to say, what is your daily practice? So that would be the third turn on the wheel. What is your daily practice? And if you don't have a daily practice where you're somehow interfacing with um, the great mystery in a conscious way. We're in the middle of mystery. We're born into it. We live in it. We're going to die into the mystery. There's no way to get out of this mysterium tremendum, this great mystery of life. Okay, but if your daily practice is what you do every day as a kind of your own personal meeting with this, okay, and it can be if it's full, it's taking in your mind, it's taking in your body, and it's taking in your heart. These are the three parts. We don't really have parts. We're not like a machine, but these are our three gifts. Is we have a mind, terrific mind. We can read, we can write, we can reason, and then we also have a body which has its own wisdom and its own needs, and then we have a heart. So your practice would be like for the mind. The first thing I do. This is just my kind of integral practice to bring in all these three, and you'll find your own. But this is important if you're going to be a 21st century uh, uh, adult spirituality person. I get up in the morning, I make my way to the kitchen, I make a cup of coffee, and then I sit down and do some spiritual reading. I did that this morning. Okay, and when you're doing spiritual reading, you're using the mind, listening to talk like this, where I'm using words, you're using the left brain. See, we're dancing between the mind and the heart. When you're really deep, you're dancing between mind, body, and heart, the whole thing. But I'll sit down, I'll read today. I read some from a book by a Jungian thing that actually Susan, who's watching today, sent me this book. I finally got to it, Susan, the Jim Hollis book. Uh, so that's what they call in Christianity Lectio Divina, sacred reading. It could be the Bible, it could be the Bhagavad Gita, it could be the Tao, it could be these classic documents, or it could be reading somebody who's speaking of the depths, like a Jungian theologian. Okay, so that's, and just study too. That, study doesn't end when you get out of, college or high school or however far we got. It's just to really study something, to really try to go deep. Well, it's a mental thing. That's a good practice. And then for the body part, self-care, diet, yoga, exercise. I do I exercise while my little coffee thing is trying to, takes about 3 minutes for it to, when I put it on the burner, it's a little Italian pot for coffee. And so I do some exercises while I'm doing that. Okay. Walking, being in nature. That's a huge practice, to get out into nature every day. Take a walk in nature. That's the lovely thing about here. When you come for a retreat here, you can go walk down the road. It's a bit of a sweat lodge experience now, but the other, most of the time it's quite pleasant. But it's a kind of purification walk now. But it's still, that's all connected with the body of the world. There's spirit in everything. And then the third thing for the heart is kind of psycho-spiritual there. The therapy, good therapy. You're dealing with the psyche. The psyche means the soul. So when we have psychology and whatever, it was originally the art of relating to the soul. And the soul's in your right brain. Your right brain gets you in connection with the soul. And then meditation. Meditation is dealing with the heart and the soul, you see. So mind, body, and soul practice. And if you're not doing something every day for that, well, let me put it this way. If you are doing something every day for that, you're growing by leaps and bounds, even if it doesn't feel like it at the time, because you're exercising these three gifts that we have. We have a mind, we have a body, and we have a soul. And they're precious, and you just don't want to ignore any of them. I ignored the body for a long time, and really the soul, and I just lived in the mind for decades. It's okay. It's the way we're raised, but now we have a chance to branch out. Okay. Now the last thing I would say is community, which is what we've got right here. A couple of things about community. Nobody grows up alone. And there's a lot of stuff we've got to do. I make my own coffee. You got to pull your own, to tie your own shoes and all that. There's things we have to do. But in terms of the complete mandala of spiritual practice that I imagine, and the community is going to be more important going forward. No one grows up alone. And we have a lot of immature adolescent men running this country right now. That's all I can say, to be charitable to them. I mean, you can't blame an adolescent in a way, because they're just too young. They don't have they haven't gone through the things. They haven't been initiated. We have uninitiated young boys who could be 80 years old running the whole shebang, and that's the problem. And so you really grow in a community. We need a community. I need the heart-to-heart community. It's what I understand what Martin Luther King said now when he was talking about the beloved community, because this is it for me. I've been with a lot of groups, and you can, maybe you're in a 12-step group. Maybe that's, you can have more than one community. That's a problem of riches there. but you have to have a community. And I think it's going to be a small kind of community rather than being in a mega church, one of these mega churches where you don't really know any of these people. If you're in this community and you show up on a regular basis, you get to know people and people support you and you support them. Okay. Uh, Community is a place where you can give and receive, which is the important part about uh, the way we end all of our get-togethers here, is this give and take of the community conversation. Um, you know, uh, we give what's going on. I always say, that when you're in that kind of situation, really what matters is what's killing you at the moment and what's keeping you alive, and that's what we talk about a lot of times. And both of them are valuable because they're just different parts of the wheel, aren't they? And disorder and emptiness, these, you feel like you're dying, and then when reorder and order, you feel like, and so we share that, and so it's a place to give and receive. Uh, the question there, that's the fourth question. So, what are you living for is the view question. Who are your core teachers is the teaching question. What is your daily practice? And it's up to you to put it together. I can't do that. I share what I do, but you have to fit one into your life and your situation. How can I exercise and develop my mind, my body, and my heart? Okay, and then the fourth one is where's your community? Uh, and I mean, feel so lucky to have had this community emerge out of COVID, and this is my beloved community. Now, and it's to give and receive. It's this give and take kind of thing that goes on all the time. I'm giving a teaching now. Hopefully, you're taking something from it that's helpful for you. Okay. And then we'll go back into meditation for a second dive into just raw experience with the great mystery, with life itself. And we're talking about how to do that. Most people don't know how to do that. They never had any instruction. They don't even know you could do it, but you do. We're working on it. Now, the last thing about community I think that's important is trust. Uh, uh, and Ira Progoff, who taught me, he was a Jungian American therapist, a psychologist who taught me how to lead his intensive journal groups, and I did that for 7 years with him. I trained in Chicago 9 hours a day for 6 days with about 70 or 80 other people to be one of his facilitators, and the guy had immense wisdom. And if you have ever see or you ever had any kind of work with the intensive journal, it was complicated. It was he had stuff where it was something, you had to study it. Uh, and so he gave us a lot of information, but at the end he said, now you can draw a line under all of this. He says you could perfectly master all of this, but when you have some people come into a small community to learn how to write this thing, he says if you don't create an atmosphere of trust, none of it works. I don't care what you pick up, it doesn't work. People do not open up unless they're in a situation where they feel safe. So that's really one of the great benefits of having a small community. It's very hard to get that feeling in a mega church or even just in a normal church where you might have a couple hundred people and people come in all day. It just, you're worried about dressing all right and who are these people, whatever. But when you have a small community, you get to know people, which is how you learn to trust people who are different than you. And from trust, you can trust um, that you can love them and you can receive love from them. Trust leads to this mutual exchange of love, which is what everybody wants. I mean, it's from the way I look at the universe. it's the center of it is this energy that is called with these four letters just love. But I mean, that's a dangerous four letters too, because everybody thinks it's, you know, dating and sex and marriage and whatever. And, all those things are great. But this love we're talking about is something more fundamental. It's what's moving everything. And it's what everybody wants at some level. And it's what none of us probably had enough of growing up. And it can be everything from physical holding. Again, we got body, we got a heart, and we got a mind, and our bodies need to be held the right way. And to experience love. And your mom, uh, she could only work with what she had, and some of us didn't. And Merton never had a mother who could hold him. That something he had to grow out of and grow through. Yeah. So nobody grows up alone. This is a place you can give and take, and also it's a place that you can start to trust that you're loved. I'm doing this I learned for the Tibetans because I had no real way of serious grieving loss. I grew up Catholic. I mean, people died, and you went to the funeral, and maybe you cried or whatever, but then you dropped them in the ground, and then you went on with your life, and it was just not that deep. The Tibetans give you a way to sit with in the terms of loss of life when you lose somebody's uh, their essence leaves their body, and then what do you do? And I've been sitting with my brother-in-law now. It's 20 some days, and the thing I always tell them, and the Tibetans teach you this early on, is to tell the departed, the traveler who is going through uh, a transition to come back into life, perhaps in another body. I mean, the Dalai Lama has been around 14 times. So supposedly, and he's coming, he says he's 90 now. He says, I'll be back. So I'm not going to leave you guys in a lurch. I'll be back. And, he's coming back to help people who are suffering. Okay. That's the Bodhisattva vow. That's a beautiful thing. You don't have to be a Tibetan Buddhist to see the beauty of that this guy's going to come back. And we can come back to help people because, I'm 75. We'll be in a world of hurt probably as long as I'm on this planet. So I plan on coming back. But that sense of to find ways to love, and also for me, it was the hardest thing is to drop my 1,000-pound shield and let people love me. That's sometimes the hardest thing of all. And I tell you, that's why I call this my beloved community, because I feel that coming from the people who show up, and sometimes complete strangers come in. Well, they're not a stranger once they're here. That's another thing about a community. It has to be hospitable. We have to welcome anybody, and uh, and being here has changed me as much as any other community I've been in. Well, more than any other community I've ever been in, and I got to thank you for that.